revolution, rebellion, mutiny, military coup, or civil war. All these words in one way or another reflect the essence of what was happening in Russia and has actually already ended. You all know very well that private military company Wagner, led by its leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, started the process of denazification and demilitarization of Russia, but ended sooner than we hoped. The interesting thing is that the rebellion ended without achieving any significant result, or we are led to believe. I'm Maria Drutska, and in this video we will summarize what happened and describe the possible consequences of Russia's almost civil war. Everything started on Friday evening when videos were published in which supposedly individual soldiers of Wagner claimed that they were just fired upon by the forces of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation while being in the rear. The official sources of the Russian Ministry of Defense denied this almost immediately, and other than a video released by Wagner, there is no real evidence for this happening. Prigozhin accused Shoigu of personally coordinating the attack on Wagner from Rostov. By about midnight, posts began to appear from users of various Telegram channels claiming that supposedly huge columns of machinery were moving towards border crossing points and were preparing to move deep into Russia. Because the photos and videos of the enemy's forces and equipment moving did not appear immediately, after some time many pro-Kremlin bloggers and media started screaming that there are actually no columns and this is all a provocation. However, a little earlier, the FSB of Russia announced the initiation of the criminal case in connection with the uprising. Then, in early morning on Saturday, photos and videos of mercenaries moving within Russia began to appear and footage from Moscow started to emerge, showing military equipment, soldiers and the Rosgvardia National Guard moving. Throughout Friday and the early hours of Saturday, Prigozhin released several messages, some aimed at Shoigu and Gerasimov, where he even said he would hang Shoigu publicly on the Red Square, but interestingly, did not blame Putin. Many analysts have pointed this out as if he were trying to get Putin onto his side against the Russian MOD. Available Russian forces around Moscow were put on alert. Interestingly, some of Russia's military who wanted to stay aside did not respond to the Russian leadership's calls and orders, and instead remained as observers. The media space, especially Russian Telegram channels, were going crazy, while Ukrainians were furiously scrolling the timeline trying to understand whether it's fake or not. Russian media of various directions were becoming demoralized and started dividing into camps, Wagner or the Russian MOD. On Saturday morning, we saw many videos where detachments of Wagner's men were seen entering Rostov, taking over key points and military facilities. The headquarters of the southern military district of the Russian armed forces was identified in a video featuring Prigozhin himself. Townspeople began to post a bunch of videos with soldiers not yet fully understanding what was happening in the country. Prigozhin, in his next audio message, claimed that 3 Russian Air Force helicopters had been shot down. He also released a video of frank conversation with Russian generals in Rostov, seemingly convincing them to support his cause. At 9 in the morning, a speech from Vladimir Putin was announced, which was slightly delayed. During the speech, Putin, as always, told many lies, and from his words, it allowed that at this terrible time, when Russia was repealing the armed aggression of the Nazis and NATO countries, this Wagner rebellion was a stab in the back. Of course, Putin forgets to mention that the Wagner Group was his instrument of influence in various countries around the world. Putin labeled this treason and issued orders to neutralize the threat. He issued orders for Prigozhin to be killed. Prigozhin replied that he and his PMC did not intend to submit to Putin, and of course it was clear which side Putin took, that of his MOD and Russian military. But before I continue, I would like to ask you, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And remember, if you enjoy these videos, consider supporting this channel on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, as this is what allows us to continue making these videos. It is clear that Wagner did not plan to stop in Rostov. Desperately, what some people say, the Russian military is 90% in Ukraine, and this allowed Wagner to advance basically unopposed in Russia. After Rostov, several columns began to advance toward Voronezh. Prigozhin planned this well in advance, and we know this because he took air defense systems with him down to down Russian aviation, which he did quite successfully. The air forces, controlled by the Ministry of Defense in its classic style, began to strike at civilian cars on the road, demonstrating their precision and training. At the same time, Wagner's men continued to fortify themselves in Rostov, mining the main approaches and buildings. There is an interesting hypothesis that in April and May of this year, we regularly heard about how Yevgeny Prigozhin lacked ammunition for various types of weapons. It turns out that the Wagnerites falsified ammunition expenses by making hidden warehouses. Now I guess we know why they were doing that. Some time after Rostov was captured and Wagner continued their advance, videos began to appear, filmed near Voronezh, where gunfire and explosions can be heard. As a result of attack by the K-52 helicopter, a Russian oil depot caught fire. After a relatively long time, Russia's main TikToker Ramzan Kadyrov sent part of his forces in the direction of Rostov. The situation in Moscow was very interesting, where available forces were gathering and barricades were being prepared at all entrances to the city. It is known for certain that not all units agreed to support the Kremlin and instead became observers. According to unverified data, the Russian Ministry of Defense was withdrawing part of its forces from the front and returning them to Moscow. Then suddenly, after Wagner had advanced 800 kilometers and were less than 200 kilometers from Moscow, Prigozhin and the Kremlin came to an agreement through Lukashenko, the president of Belarus. You may know that Prigozhin has been close both to Lukashenko and Putin for many years. We don't know much about this agreement other than Wagner has now turned back and Prigozhin went to Belarus, effectively in exile. Honestly, it's a mess. My team and I, when preparing materials, were quite skeptical about Wagner and Putin's action in this case from the very beginning of this spectacle. But the situation is what it is. From what is currently available, I conclude that Putin has lost control and he's no longer Russia's president. In the morning, you accuse Prigozhin of treason, and by late evening, the situation is resolved. Prigozhin's maneuver brilliantly illustrated the weakness of the Russian authorities and how a few thousand well-armed soldiers can march to Moscow in a few hours. The power vacuum we saw indicates that central power is weak and unable to cope with the entire internal crisis. Initially, I thought it was only Prigozhin who benefits from this situation, as he has demonstrated that he can get what he needs from Kremlin by force. However, on closer inspection, though Russia and Putin has been embarrassed and weakened, we don't actually know what the negotiations were. Peskov claimed that everything was fine and the president himself had given Prigozhin and Wagner security guarantees. And well, as a Ukrainian, I'm fully aware of what Putin's securing guarantees mean. What's really going on is anyone's guess. However, whatever the intention, it's exposed serious problems within the Kremlin and within Russia. I don't think that this can be the end of it. Putin's entire image to date has been about power and control, and somehow a private army marches almost to the gate of Moscow and he has just accepted an agreement and everything is forgiven? And we need to consider, what about all those units commanders, bloggers and Wagner mercenaries themselves, all who sided with Prigozhin? Will they just be forgiven? What about the Russian pilots that Wagner killed and the Russian aircraft it destroyed? No. I think this is not the end of it, and there is no Putin would let Prigozhin or anyone else pull such a stunt and get away with it. I think in the immediate future we will not see any reaction from Russia, but I'm sure there will be one. We joke about Putin being a bunker Führer, as someone who hasn't any idea of what is going on, but we must not forget, this is a man who came from nothing and took absolute control over Russia. He is called calculating, and though his power may have weakened, it would be foolish to suggest he does not have several moves still to play. And we also joke about Shoigu and Gerasimov, but let me remind you what the head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, General Zaluzhny, said. I do not pay attention to what Putin says about war. I pay attention to what Gerasimov says and does. He must not be underestimated. It is too early to say what happens next, but it would be wise to pay close attention to what happens in Russia and the Kremlin over the coming days, weeks and months. Now, for Ukraine, even if this rebellion or civil war is over for now, it is a very good thing. Not only because Wagner destroyed Russian helicopters and killed Russian pilots, but because now Putin and the Russian MOD have two wars to fight, one against Ukraine and one against their own. And everyone, not only in Ukraine, but also Russia and the rest of the world, know this. Slava Ukraini!